How was the party first?
Hold on, we're on it.
Huh?
Hold on.
Now enjoy the show. The Voice 17104, a station for everyone.
Welcome to Did You Know with Richard Utley. During this one-hour program, join us as we take a look at today's headline news, Richard's views, history, inspirational interviews, and much more. Did you know this program airs every first and third Tuesday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube? Here's Richard. Now sit back and enjoy today's feature presentation.
Good morning. And how are you this morning? Well, I want you to know, welcome to Did You Know? Well, we got a good program today. I think you're going to enjoy the program, and hopefully it's going to enlighten some of you to want to tell your story. And if you want to tell your story, if you want to tell things that you think is very important, then all I want you to do is to go into Facebook, Did You Know Richard Utley, and just send me your name and your information and what you want to talk about, and I'd be glad to look at it and bring you on to tell your side of the story. This is what this is about. This program is Did You Know? Is to talk about things that we need to talk about, and we need to have programs to define who we are. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I keep telling you, we don't control the media. And what the media controls about us is not always positive. So it's important for us to start to control that narrative for us. Well, I'm going to start out like I always start out, politics. And let me tell you about politics. I told some of you that you need to start to run for public office. And I believe that. We don't have the right to sit around and complain without doing something to change this. And you are the one that can change it. So over the holiday season, I want you to talk to your relatives, I want you to talk to your friends, and I want you to sit back and say, what don't you like? What don't you like about government? Or what do you feel that we should change? And I believe a lot of you can play a very important role in that. So, January is the time that you have to start to get your, whatever the process is wherever you live. Get your petitions and all of that and your committee and learn what you need to do before you run. A lot of times people say they want to run and then they realize they have to get a petition and they have to have so many signatures. And guess what? I can tell you this from my experience with people I've worked with. Great candidate, but didn't follow the rules. And they were supposed to have 200 signatures. The day they had to turn them in, they only had 200. And 10 of them weren't worth anything. So how many? They only had 190. Wow. I always tell people, if they tell you 200, get 400. Because some of the petitions can be challenged. And you don't want to put yourself in that situation. And so I want us to be prepared. So I'm going to bring this up all the way up to the primary. That we got to have candidates to run for office. So like I said, if you don't like the school board, or you don't like council, you don't like borough council, whatever you don't like, if you think you can do a better job, then I'm asking you. Believe me, I'm asking you, then you should run for office. That's the first thing I want to talk about. The other thing is, let's talk about this. Now, all of a sudden, before you may want to go to a park, and it was Martin Luther King Day, and they might let you in, and now they won't let you in. Pettiness is pettiness. And if you believe because you don't want to let us in to go to the national park on Martin Luther King's birthday, or because of Juneteenth or whatever, and you take it away, do you really think that you're punishing someone? I hope you don't think that. Because I believe that if you really want to celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday or Juneteenth or whatever, you can celebrate it in your own way. And then sometime you can have your own picnic. So pettiness has to stop. But since pettiness has been brought up, believe me, we're not crying over the fact that we can't get in free in a national park in those 2 particular days. So you take them away. So now all of a sudden now, and I remember going to I remember going to Arlington Cemetery and all those places, and you go into the bookstore, and they had all kinds of paraphernalia that they shared about our history. Well, now it's being taken away. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, I told you, we got to tell our own history. If we keep waiting on somebody to tell our own history, then shame on us. Because I think that we ought to stop that. We ought to stop that foolishness of waiting on somebody to tell our history. And so, the fact that we need to know our history, I think we have to do our research on our history. And I also think we need to do the history in the neighborhoods that we live in. Ladies and gentlemen, I am convinced you're going to be shocked at the people that you grew up around, or they played a significant role in your neighborhood, but you don't know who they are. Let me tell you, somebody came before you, somebody came before me, and there's some people out there that did some wonderful things in our neighborhood, and I think we should pay honor to them. I think we should pay honor to them, and I think we should tell their stories. Let's not just let it be gone. So I'm asking all of you to start doing some research on the neighborhood that you live in. Find out who that church was. Find out who that minister was. Find out who that councilman was. Find out who that lady that watched all of us in the neighborhood. We all had them. Let's pay honor to them. So if nothing else, I asked you to do a little research and sit back and go, oh, yeah, Miss such and such, she played a role in my life. Because I think that that's the key now. We got to start developing the role models we have, and we got to share those role models. Because I've realized now a lot of times people do not realize that we all had role models. Because I'm tired of the negativeness we always see. Because believe me, we played a very, very important part in not only in this country, but we played a very important in our neighborhood. And so many people played very important in our lives. So I'm asking you this in these next 2 weeks, just before the year's up, just sit back and pay credence to somebody, even if it's to somebody you know. Just sit back and say, Mr. Dokes was an okay guy, or whoever. Let's just do that. Or you know, such and such's grandma, if it wouldn't have been for her saying, boy or ladies or whatever, I know what y'all doing, you know you're going on the wrong path, go on the right path. All right, so today, I got a very interesting program for you today. And this interesting program I have on today, I'm bringing a good friend of mine on. And he's going to tell you who he is. I'm going to talk about him. But we're going to tell you why I think it's so important for you to do your own research and find out in your family you may have some people that's famous. So I'm going to be bringing on Ron Hill. He lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He lives in Homewood. That's where he grew up at. And the reason I'm bringing him on today is because he had an uncle. His uncle's name was John Preston, but he was really called Pete Hill. And we're going to talk about Pete Hill. He's a black baseball legend. That's one of the reasons I brought him on, because he's going to tell you how it all happened. But I'm going to play a little insert for you before I bring him on.
That we've been waiting for. The honorary street renaming for the legendary John Preston Pete Hill. Can we just celebrate?
Pete Hill Way is up. The renaming has occurred right here in Homewood, a section of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it's Kevin Cameron for Pittsburgh's DSEN. And I'm here with family member to talk about the renaming of the street. That was your great uncle. The playing of baseball by black youth has decreased over a number of decades, right? And it's important for people to understand the people that actually helped start the game in our community. And this is a great way for people to actually have that understanding of who John Preston Hill, and they called him Pete, right?
Yes.
okay, who exactly he was.
Yes.
And there were a lot of great remarks outside about this particular renaming. And something that stood out to me during the renaming ceremony was someone said that he was actually inducted into the Pro Baseball Hall of Fame 2 times.
Yes, it was. The first time they put him under the wrong name of Joseph Hill.
Okay.
But as I did this research along with Sam Nelson, I came up with his name was John Hill.
8 years ago, our family received a phone call that changed everything. A baseball researcher was looking for descendants of a Negro League legend named Pete Hill. We had no idea who he was.
My father always said we had a great baseball player in the family, but we never paid any attention to him.
Yeah.
So I think about 1910, and Ancestry.com called us and said, hey, you got a great baseball player in your family. And then from there, I notified the Culpeper people and they did the research.
We discovered not just a baseball player, but a 5-tool phenomenon. A man who hit .324 over his career, a man his contemporaries call the most dangerous man in a pinch in baseball history.
And Bill James, the influential baseball writer, historian, and statistician, widely recognized as the father of sabermetrics, otherwise known as the statistical analysis of baseball, described John Preston Pete Hill as an elite and historically significant player. In his seminal work, the Bill James Historical Baseball Abstract, which provides a comprehensive decade-by-decade analysis and ranking of players and teams, Bill James ranked Pete Hill as the 7th greatest baseball player of all time.
He can hit, he can hit power, he can run, he can field, and he can throw.
100 years after his finals.
Okay, that's why I'm bringing on Ron Hill to talk about his great-great-uncle. But before we do that, Ron, please tell the audience who you are and your journey that you've been on for a long time. But let me, I believe in being transparent, ladies and gentlemen. I have known Ron a long time. And not only have I known Ron a long time, I grew up in Homewood. So to put it in perspective, Homewood, Brushton would be a neighborhood that I'm very familiar with because that's where I'm from. Please do.
I grew up in, my name is Ron Hill. I grew up in Homewood back in the 60s, and I went to Westinghouse High School, played football there. And then I moved on and went to Tuskegee University in Alabama. And I went to school with Lionel Richie, and I met Stokely Carmichael there. I met H. Rap Brown there during the 60s when they were having all the civil rights voting and stuff like that. And basically, that's who I am.
Ron, tell me, how did you have this paraphernalia on right now, the Negro League of 1920, and he's in the Hall of Fame? How did you guys really find out who he was?
Well, the story goes when I was younger, going to Homewood Field with my dad, he said, we have a great baseball player in the family. So, back in the day, Black folks never really talked about who the people were. So you just played past it, and I just went on. So one day, Ancestry.com called my family and said, you have a great baseball player in your family. So when they did that, I did a little research, but they had his name wrong in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, but his real name was John Preston Pete Hill. So what I did was I contacted the people down in Culpeper County where he was born. They did a lot of research on him and found out that who he was, where he lived at. And then also I found out that at that particular time, there was a great migration that came to Pittsburgh. And that great migration brought my family to Pittsburgh in 1899. They were possibly out of slavery for 20 years before they got to Pittsburgh. So 1899, they settled in Homewood on Susquehanna Street, 7241. So about 1901 or 1902, he began to play baseball for the first colored league team called Pittsburgh Keystones. And he played for that team for about a year. Then he moved on and played for some of the greatest teams that was ever assembled.
Okay, a lot of people didn't, and that's important to know because when people think of the Negro League, and especially if they think of Pittsburgh, of course they think of the Homestead Graves or the Crawford Graves, teams like that. That's who they think about. If they think about the Negro League, they think about Satchel Paige and people of that nature. But the importance is, your great, he was way back there. He was a trailblazer. That's why it's important for us to do research on what's going on in our families, because you find out there's a lot of gems in our families that we did not know about. And so go ahead.
You have to realize that he is the pioneer, because that colored league was the first league before the National Negro League. So he's the pioneer before the Josh Gibsons, the Satchel Pages, the Stearns family people, and you can imagine what they went through prior to when they came along. So that's called pre-Negro baseball. The white folks don't really want to talk about it. They want to start in 1920, but there's great people before that, like Rube Foster, the father of black baseball. If it wasn't for Rube Foster, there wouldn't have been no baseball.
Would you say their names again? So I want my audience to start to do some research now. Who are the names that you talked about? Because most now, let's be honest, because everybody thinks of Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson. That's who I grew up knowing.
No, it started like with a guy named Rube Foster. Rube Foster was the father of black baseball. Pete Hill was his right-hand man. These guys are the pioneers. So they began these different teams back in the day, like the Chicago American Giants, the Detroit Stars, the Leland Giants, these teams like that. Those were some of the greatest black teams that were ever assembled in baseball. You look at Pete Hill. Pete Hill in 1919 was the manager and the player of the 1919 Detroit Stars. In that particular year, he hit 28 home runs on the black side, and on the white side, Babe Ruth hit 29. So they compared him to Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb. So those are the pioneers of black baseball.
I think what you're saying, because I'm in Harrisburg here, and Harrisburg had a team. A lot of places had teams, and I think it's important that we honor those baseball players and the significance that they played, because a lot of times, and I can tell you this, a lot of times people don't give us credit in terms of what we want to do. I can tell you for a fact. Now, this is what I heard. My father used to tell me that he was a great pitcher, but he said he could never experience it because of segregation. So he was before his time. And I remember days, that's why I'm sure a lot of African Americans know why we like the Brooklyn Dodgers, and we think of Jackie Robinson, and Jackie Robinson became our hero. And when Branch Rickey brought him up and to play into the Dodger organization, and what he went through. And I'm sure most of you have probably watched the Jackie Robinson movies, and to see what they went through, just think what these other guys went through. Just think what Pete Hill went through way back. And the reason why I think it's so important, because, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes we think we had it tough. Believe me, we did not have it tough like them. But I will say this, we didn't have it tough like them, but we better get ourselves together, because we're going to be tough again.
Hey, Rich, you talked about Branch Rickey, and he picked Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson was not the best ball player at that particular time when he picked him. But the only reason why they wanted Jackie Robinson was because they seen the revenue, that money that we was drawing on that black side. They wanted some of that money, so they started taking those players. So financially, they took him because they wanted that black dollar. That's why that happened that way.
I mean, you're right, because if people start to do their research, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, we played a significant role in those things. But my point is about you talking about him, and I brought it up earlier. They were the trailblazers who got no credit, and it's time for us to give them credit, because they deserve the credit, because they are the ones that laid the trail for us. That's why I am where I am. That's why he is what he is. I mean, Ron played baseball in Homewood, Brushton. Remarkably, I played baseball too in Homewood, same field that he played on. But we have to look back at where our heroes are, and the point of this program for me is that the struggles that people went through to achieve the goals that they wanted to achieve. And sometimes we think, woe me. Woe me, we have a tough road. And there's so many people that were so much tougher. And people went through a lot of things. So we got a lot to talk about here because I've known you a long time. Do you want to say anything about your uncle great uncle, before we move on? Because I got some other things to talk to you about.
Um, this is the reason why, like when we came to Homewood, during the great, let's start back to the beginning. During the Great Migration, and I didn't ever realize that a lot of those people that lived in Homewood and in that area all came from Culpeper County. They all moved up there to Pittsburgh and established a church, Kareem Baptist on Frankstown. That's where a lot of people from Culpeper went to church there because the Reverend came from down there and he established a church there. And so so when we was going to high school, we knew people in high school with different names. Like their people came from Culpeper. I never knew that until I did this research. Like the Stroman families and these different Henderson families, they all come from down there in Culpeper County.
I think most neighborhoods, minority neighborhoods, it's like that. Even up in Stilton, Pennsylvania, Stilton, a lot of them came from the same little town, or it's like anything else. The reason that I got to Pittsburgh was because my mother had some relatives there who gave my father and my mother the opportunity to come. Some of them went to Pittsburgh, some of them went to Philadelphia, some of them went to New York for the, as you say, the Great Migration. So my point is, and I'm going to change the subject, ladies and gentlemen, do your research in the neighborhood that you grew up in. Let's play. Sure, they have. I'll tell you this, at the Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, they have a little section there of the black baseball players that played in Stilton or Homewood or wherever. They all got them. But my point is, we need to honor them. We need to honor them. Why do we need to honor them? Because of the legacy that they went through.
And we also need to get a lot of our parents, get our kids to playing baseball again, because we have very few black kids playing baseball. Our kids are playing football and they're playing basketball, but everybody's not going to NBA. Everybody's not going to, but in baseball, you can secure a position and play for a long length of time and make a lot of money. So I'm trying to encourage a lot of black kids to get into baseball again. I have sponsored teams in Pittsburgh and had them in tournaments. The Josh Gibson Foundation, they have a tournament every year. I had a team this year that I sponsored, and it was called the Pittsburgh Keystones. I used that first name of the team that my great uncle played for. So we played in that. So every year I'm going to have a team to play in that tournament.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to some other things. Ron, I've known you a long time, and I want the audience to know some of the roles that you played, because sometimes people see things they don't know what people have done. And so since I've known you, and I want you to talk about your experience of working for the Sugar Hill Gang. But before you talk about you working for the Sugar Hill Gang and some of the people that you worked for and some of the people that you had to deal with, I'm going to have Ron tell you about them. But I will say this. Some of you who know me, and some of you know that I used to do concerts and shows and things of that nature. But you know where I really learned it from? That gentleman there. Because he's the one that taught me a lot of the things that I learned about wanting to be a concert promoter. So in that, I want him to be able to tell you who he is.
So, I used to go downtown and watch a lot of concerts, and I always noticed that I've never seen a lot of black people promoting these shows, and they were making money off of black people as usual. So what I did one day, I was working for General Motors as a field representative. I went downtown one day and I went to Stanley Theater, and I started talking to them one time. I said, hey, I wonder if I can get a job here. I seem like you have a lot of black shows, but I don't ever see any black participation as far as promotions. So the next thing I know, they gave me a job. So I started working for them. So I did shows like with Luther. I did shows with the SOS Band, Rick James, Third World, Bob Marley. So I've been around a lot of different acts and seen a lot of different things and how it worked. Now, every time the Caesar Engler would do a black show, there was always a black promoter in another town that would partner with them. And because the black promoters out of Detroit, man, they had all some of the biggest acts like Luther, they had Prince tour, they had the Michael Jackson tour. So what they do is they intertwine with each other, and then they partner up. Then they say D. Caesar Angler presents Michael Jackson or somebody like that. But the other guy in the background is a partner also. So at that particular time, then I met Richard. Richard started talking to me about the stuff and everything, and I said, all right, I showed him how to do it and how to get into it. But while I worked for the Caesar Engler, when the Sugar Hill Gang people came to, well, no, first of all, I booked the Sugar Hill Gang to come to Pittsburgh when they first started out. So actually, I probably brought the first hip hop group into Pittsburgh that was a professional hip hop. So we had Grandmaster Flash. We had the Funky 4+1. We had the Sequence Girls. We had all these different groups, and we called it the Rappers Convention. So when I brought them in, and Miss Robinson came in with the group, she seen me working around the box office and doing a lot of things. She said, hey, can I speak to you? So I went over and spoke to her, and she said, hey, you think you could be a tour manager, come work for me up at our company in New Jersey? And that was Sylvia Robinson. She used to have a record called Love is Strange. She was an artist. She wrote the song Love on Two-Way Street. She had the group The Moments. And then, so she invited me up to Jersey. So that fall on Monday, I was in the Bahamas with the Sugar Hill Gang. And then from there, I just stayed up there and worked for them for like 2 or 3 years. And went on tour all across the country with the Sugar Hill Gang, the Grandmaster Flash, Sequence. Angie Stone was one of the Sequence girls. And she left there and became a great artist. And she was just killed not long ago in a car crash. So, and then I had Spoonie G. I had a lot of these different groups. And Treacherous 3 was the part of that Sugar Hill stuff. So that was my experience in the music field.
Tell them a little bit of the stories, stories in terms of it was a tough job. And would you explain that? Because the reason why sometimes people don't understand, I want them to get a taste of it all ain't glamour. I want people to hear you talk about, and you and I can talk about it, because you were on tour. Explain to them what a tour manager does, please.
So on the tour managers, what I did was I would rent those buses. We have drivers on the buses. So what we have to do, I had to pay them per diem per day. First of all, when we go to different cities, they drive us in, they let us off the bus, and they'll go to sleep. So what a road manager really does, he's like at this particular time, because I had those young kids, I was like a babysitter. So I had I collect the money, I make the payrolls, I make sure they get on the stage at times. You have to do a lot of, I had to take them to different places where they were like at different record stores for promotions. And so it's like a job of you're like a manager, and you're just managing things, When they get sick, you got to find doctors for them in the different cities. And then, on these tours, you're only allowed to go 500 miles every night on a bus. You can't go you can't get on a bus and go like 10 hours somewhere. You have to do it from city to city. I would go from Pittsburgh, Cleveland, St. Louis, going to Detroit and stuff like that. Then when we went to California, when we get off those buses, the buses would go, we'd get on planes, then we'd meet up in California on the buses. So that's what the manager does. You collect the money from the promoter. You don't put the acts on until you get the money, and you don't take checks. So you got to get paid in cash. So you get paid in cash every night. So once I get the cash, I call my friend on the walkie-talkie. It's all right, they can go on. Then I would take that money, go back to the hotel, and I put it in the hotel, and then I would find a bank and I would transfer that money back to Sugar Hill. So that's what it is. It's like a lot of responsibility. And another thing, when I was out as a road manager, I might have been like one of the first black road managers because when I would go into the box office, they want to know who I was. And I said, well, I'm here for Sugar Hill. And then, every other black act had white boys collecting money. I'm collecting money as the road manager, but the other group's road manager had white guys. So there was very few of us out on the road. But Miss Robinson, that's what she wanted. She wanted a black road manager. So, and then when you book these shows, there was an agency you'd have to go to in New York because before you go on the road, people have to put up half the money. So if we're collecting $25,000 a night, they have to come up with a deposit of $12,500. So that would go over to the guy that books the show, the bookers. So right before you go out on tour, you go there and get that money because that money makes your payrolls, it makes your stuff, makes them buses roll and everything. So that's how you have to do that, deal with these different agencies.
So you were responsible. You had to make sure that if the rooms were right, you had to make sure that the equipment was right. You had to make sure.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand that because they see the act on the stage, but they don't understand. I'd like you to explain the rider, all that too, because I want my audience to really see the nuts and bolts.
So before you go out and deal with these different promoters that's going to do your show, you have a rider. A rider has what type of food you may want, what type of soda you may want. It just tells you what we need. And the rider might say that we want you to supply the drums this time because we're not bringing any drums. And on that rider just tells everything that needs to be done. And it tells you on the rider also, we want to know how many tickets you're selling and how many tickets you're giving away. So we that's another part of the job. It is so much to do. Like even the T-shirts. When you sell T-shirts on the road, the people that you're having the show at, they have to count them T-shirts in because they get a percentage of that T-shirt money. Like they might get 15% or something, but you have to count that in. So I had a guy that does the merch. He comes in, he brings the T-shirts in, he sells up with that guy at the end of the night, get his money, and they take their money, they take their cut. Okay, so that's another aspect of that job. And then you got to make sure that, like the hotel rooms are cool. You got to make sure that all the artists are on the bus in the morning. Sometimes artists will go off, and we'll just leave them, but they managed to get to the next city to do the gig. So it wasn't like, because if you're not up at the time they're going on the bus, we got to get on the road because it's about money, it's about contract, and it's about stuff like that. So you got to be in that next town and ready to go. So you can't wait like at 12 o'clock noon, waiting for somebody because you won't get into the next town too really late. So we did all that kind of stuff. I was on a show with Frankie Beverly and Mays in New Orleans. I've been on shows with Rick James, Tina Marie, SOS Band, Al Jarreau, Randy Crawford, Phyllis Hyman, a Pittsburgh person. So I've been around a lot of those people and seen a lot of stuff with these artists. B.B. King, comedians, Richard Pryor, all these different artists I've been around. And,
Do you have to have a good personality and you have to have a good mental constitution to work for those? Because there's a lot of pressure on you.
Well, you mean working for the artists or working for the promoters?
Either one. You could talk about both.
Well, I can give you a little story about Miles Davis, for instance. So when I was working for Deceased Wrangler, Miles Davis came to Pittsburgh to play in the Standing Theater. At that particular time, he was married to Cecily Tyson, so I met her also. So during the day, as he's warming up, he calls me over and he talks like this. Hey, man. He said, hey, man, can you give me some cocaine? So I start laughing. He said, excuse my expression, what the fuck's funny? This is what he says to me. So So, so we go back and forth, and at that particular time, you got all these hookups. So you got to do what you got to do. You know what I mean? Because I have a book. I call it the commissary book. So whatever the artist might need, I know how to get it. So that's part of your job when you're working for these promoters. So, so I had to do that, stuff like that. And Luther's people, I met Luther's people one time. I've been around so many different people, especially the Jamaican guys like Bob Marley. For instance, if you went in the locker room at the Stanley Theater, you couldn't see anybody in the room because it'd be clouded up in there with that smoke. And then they would roll their weed in paper brown bags, first of all. And you could never get in that room because you couldn't see anybody. But then when the show started, they was out there doing their thing. So there's a lot of things behind the scenes I won't talk about that I see and stuff like that. So
Now, of course, I had the opportunity to work with you with the Caesar Engler. I remember the show. It was Luther. That's when Luther was supposed. The show was sold out, but he got sick. And if you remember, the band was there. Everybody was ready to play. The show was ready to go on, but he got sick, and you had to handle that with delicacy because the show was sold out, and they had to tell the people to come back. What was the next day?
No, that particular show that's when I did the rap show. That's the rap show when we had Jay-Z and them.
Okay.
And DMX didn't show up.
Okay.
He kept saying he was coming. So what I did was on that particular show, I said to them is, we can do the first part of the show today, and tomorrow we'll bring DMX in when he come in, and we'll do it again. So that's what they did. When they came in, he did his thing. He had his dog with him. He had his dog and his and all his people would travel with him. Jay-Z was on that show. There was like a lot of different artists on that show. It was the Swatch Watch tour, I think. I think it was about that watch back in the day. And so that was one incident. Now, when you're talking about Luther, when Luther came in, he was sick. And I had to take him to a local doctor, which you probably know who he was. I took him to Dr. Charles Heflin. Remember Mr. Heflin?
Yeah.
I took him to him, and he took care of Luther that time. And every time Luther came to town, he would go see Dr. Heflin. But anyhow, on that particular show, the band was wore out. So what happened was Dr. Heflin came down to the Civic Arena before the show, gave everybody a B12 shot. And he got them all back together again. So that night, Dr. Heflin might have made about $5,000 cash money. So you always had to have resources that you had to turn to.
People will be very shocked by this. We're telling stories here. I remember when you brought and you had me work with them when Earth, Wind, and Fire practiced at the farm show in Harrisburg before they went out on tour.
Right.
See, people don't know that, and how you had to put all that together, and that's when they did all. Would you explain to them how they practiced and all the other things that they did? That's right. Earth, Wind, and Fire was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We weren't allowed to tell nobody, but they practiced at the farm show.
Well, I called you, and you set it up.
Yeah, but the people don't understand. They don't know there's a lot of work. That's my point. I want you to tell there's a lot of work for these. They see the artists, but they don't know that you have to deal with personalities as well as everybody else around them.
Yeah, you do. I mean, everybody. A lot of these artists are like prima donna type people. They're like they demand a lot. You have to do a lot. But me as a person, before I did what I did, I guess they always had white guys taking care of them. So when they would see me, they would say, "Oh, wow, there's a black guy this time." So they were very gentle with me about a lot of stuff. I never had a lot of problems with them. Whatever they needed, I got, and that's the way it was. Even when I worked with Willie Nelson, you know who Willie Nelson is, right?
Yeah.
Catch the Western Singer. So what happened was, when I was working for Caesar Engler, we used to do Willie Nelson. So Willie Nelson comes to Pittsburgh to the Civic Arena, and I worked that night for them, but they asked me could I go on the 3-day tour with them through New York and New Jersey. So I did that. I left the Caesar England that night, got on the bus, and toured 3 days with Willie Nelson because they needed me to do certain things, and I'd done them. And then when the tour was over, they flew me back to Pittsburgh. So I've been around a lot of different white and black artists. Willie Nelson's a nice old dude, and he was just a general old dude. And I asked him a question. I asked him one question. He used to sing like he had a little blues in his body, right? Now I don't know if his story is true or not. He said when he was younger, he used to pick cotton in the fields with black people, and he would be singing with them. Now this is what he told me. So I don't know if it was a true story or anything like that, but this is the story he told me one time. So yeah.
I mean, you talked about some of the things that you did, but my audience probably don't know this. But I did work with Willie Nelson. I did work with I did work with Willie Nelson, and I did work for a promoter in Harrisburg that did a show with Metallica, and and Bob Dylan. And my job was, this is what my job was. My job was to count the merchandise.
Yeah.
My job, what they paid me before they sold the merchandise, if it was 10 t-shirts or 100 jackets, I counted them, then locked it up, and they went out and sold them. If they wanted to sell any more, they had to come back, open it up, give them to them, because that particular promoter got a percentage of the
money.
t-shirt sale.
You're right.
And
Right.
and people, and that's how I ended up working with them. Of course, I ended up working with the Caesar, and when the Caesar would do certain shows other places, I would be the one that would put it together, and then they would come in the day of the show and collect all the money and did everything else. But I was there to greet them. I was there when the buses pulled in. They needed somebody that they felt that they could trust. But the point is this: a lot of people want to do shows. I get people all the time telling me they want to be promoters, and they don't understand.
But Richard, first of all, they want to be promoters, but they got to have that insurance.
Yes,
You
I know.
got to have insurance. You got to have a lot of everything.
Right. I mean, I've done shows, and I had $1 million liability insurance policy, and people, but they want to do shows. Excuse me. Okay, what else? Let's talk about some other things. You've had an interesting career. I mean, and people, we talked about that, but the other purposes, I just want people to see us as who we are, where we come from, what we've done. I mean, you've worked in many jobs. I mean, you've been very political. You was involved in politics. Why did you get involved in politics, and why did you think it was important to be involved in politics?
So I lived in, I lived in Pittsburgh, but I lived in a place called Wilkesburg. It was a borough. And at that time, it was a Republican stronghold. They ran everything, they did everything. So what I did was I got together with a guy named Bob Pitts and another couple other people. And we put our own slate together. And we ran a lot of black people and white people on a Democrat ticket that particular year. And the reason, and that year, we won that borough. We got the Republicans out. They were very John Bircher type people. Wilkesburg was a place of the Klan, Birchers, and everything like that. And at the time, when was no black people living in Wilkesburg, you had to walk on the railroad tracks at night so you wouldn't get arrested or picked up by the police in Wilkesburg. So you had to go up on the tracks to go back to Homewood, because if they caught you there after a certain time, they take you to the station. Want to know why you're doing in Wilkesburg anyhow. So I got with the Democrat Party there, and we ran our own ticket, and we won that year. I had the highest count of in that district, because what we did was, to do that, we got all the black people together. And you got to remember, a lot of black people they didn't go to church. They didn't go to church in Wilkesburg. They went to church in the city of Pittsburgh. So we had people that lived in Wilkesburg. The word got out, and we got all the black people in Wilkesburg registered to vote. And in that particular year, like I said, we won those seats. And we had the first black mayor would be Bob Pitts, the late Bob Pitts. And I think you know him, Richard.
Yes, I do.
And then we had Karen Payne Powell, and we had Gibson Cook. You know who that is, right?
Who?
Yep, Gibson Cook.
Yeah.
Remember the judge or something? She was a judge after a while.
Yes.
She was on the school board. She won the
Right.
school board. That's where she started out, Wilkesburg on the school board.
Okay.
And so we won it. We won that year, and then that year I was made the chairman of the Democrat Party in Wilkesburg, and probably the first black to do that also as the chairman. And so I did that for a while, then I got bored and that gone.
Why do you think why do you think it's important for us to be involved in politics?
Well, first of all, when you talk about school board people, first of all, so you can set the curriculum for your child what he needs to have. Back in the day, they was when we went to school and went to Westinghouse. So when you go to the counselor's office, they used to say to you, you'd probably be good if you take a shop. So they load us up with them electric shops, those print shops and stuff like that. They would go back and say, oh no, he's not taking all these shops. And because that's what those counselors were doing. But we were lucky to have black teachers that went to HBC schools. Like, you had Mr. Bolden, you had other people and that went to these different colleges. And they kind of knew your parents and everything. So when they know your parents, you couldn't really act up because they can get on that phone and call your parents. So when you got home, you know what happens when you got to crib. So we had all that going on. We had Mrs. Faison, that was a church secretary where I went to church. We had Baptist Temple Church, which was a pillar of that community back then. My dad was assistant pastor at Baptist Temple Church. And so I came up like that. But politics, you can control your own destination. Like, you can do what you got to do. So in Wilkesburg, when they had 2 or 3 jobs, I made sure our people got jobs. I made sure the white people got jobs. So I did everything very even, Stevens, but they would never do that. But that's how I operated when I was as a council person. But politics, we need to control our own destination, and we can do it if we get out and vote. A lot of our people don't even vote. I don't understand why they don't. But if you go back into the 60s and see where they cut off our ears and burned us in fires and did everything else, burned our churches down, burned our houses down, you need to go out and vote because all those people died for us to do that. And I don't even think our people know the history because they don't read nothing. They don't want to do nothing. Just rapped and took over everything. And that gangster rap stuff, yeah, that's another story because that story comes from, the people that promote all that. I don't know if I could say that, but I don't have anything against the Jewish people, but the Jewish people was the one who put all that stuff in our community because they own all those record companies and they have all that stuff going on. So that's why you have to control your own destiny in your community. So if you're going to run, but you got to know what you're doing when you're going to run. Like Richard said, you got to make sure. Some people will sign a petition, but they're not even registered voters. So they'll sign it, but when that's turned in, they say this person's not registered, this person ain't registered. So you have to run a tight ship when it comes to politics, and you're always going to have a couple Uncle Toms in the bunch. And everything that you do, they run back and tell the boss. You have those people.
And the reason I bring up politics is because I think politics is very important, and especially today. I mean, and I think people need to understand that politics is very local. I mean, there's no question national politics has an impact on us. But I think that what we have to do is that we have to start to control their narratives in local politics. We need to, like you said, we need to dictate to what school boards, what they're teaching, what they're doing. We need to find out about city council and things like that. Now, it's amazing that you told the story about Wilkinsburg, which is like on one side of the street is Wilkinsburg and the other side of the street is Homewood, but that's in the city of Pittsburgh. But I think my audience, if they want to be honest, all can tell somewhat of the same story that you just told. I mean, we've all had our sections. I mean, people don't want to think about it, but I bring it up every now and then. Just look at the neighborhood that you grew up in. I'm not saying where you might live now, but look where your forefathers lived at and ask yourself, why did they live where they lived? They lived where they lived because they didn't have no choice. You go back and you see little towns, and now we are mayors and of many places. Back in the day we couldn't have ever been any of those things, which is some progress. But the point is that I want people to understand, you got to understand somebody paved the way for you. Somebody did all the due diligence so we could be where we are. And we all sit back now and we take good deep breaths and we think everything is okay. And now all of a sudden things are starting to unravel and we're going we. And I mean, I always bring these things up. Think about where you lived. I mean, especially in minority neighborhoods, if you really want to be honest, think about it. They're usually around railroad tracks, rivers, highways, or they're around places that it could be incinerators, it could be any of those things that's not healthy. And you wonder why we have a lot of health issues. And the reason we had a lot of health issues is because of where we live. Now, we didn't have a choice, but we have a choice now. And since we have a choice, there's no excuse for us to do what we need to do. This has been a very good conversation. This is Roll, but I'm going to ask you what you feel that you'd like to tell my audience for the next few minutes.
About
Anything that you feel that I'm giving you the opportunity to tell my audience what you feel that they need to know. I'm giving you the stage.
well, right now we're living here in the United States right now. Everybody should be aware of everything that's going around about what's happening right today. And myself, the way I think at the situation is that the black people haven't really made a move to do anything yet because we've been through this before. This is nothing new. And so what they're doing now, they're picking on the brown people, getting them out of the country because they know that once all these people stay in this country and we all unite together, that's what's making them nervous. So we have to do is stand up, look out for our children, make sure you know where your children's going every time they leave the house because you got this white supremacy stuff out here now. So you got to be very careful and keep your eye on your daughters. Everybody just can't just let them go out at night. You don't know where they're at. You have to know where they're at all times. So I'm telling the people, you need to wake up. And another thing is, I don't know if I should say this or not. As long as those white folks buy guns, you need to buy guns too because you got to protect your family.
All right. Well, thank you for being on my program. I've known you a long time because I went to Westinghouse too. I've known you, and you're going to always say what you always wanted to say ever since I've known you. But I want my audience to understand this. Everybody has an opinion. I have an opinion, he has an opinion, and you have an opinion. And I just want all of you to know that you have an opinion of what you see or what you feel or what you believe. And so you take the merit of whatever anybody says and you take it for what you believe and what it's worth. And I only say that because my thing is that a lot of things I want to bring on this program, and I want to be honest, and I want people to be objective to what they feel and what they believe. I had Ron on because I wanted him to tell you about the baseball, and he told you about the contribution, because I want you guys to write me, did you know Richard Utley, and tell me you'd like to be on this program. Because I think we have to have all kinds of narratives on this program so people can get different perspectives. Because as I've said to all of you, you are responsible to do your own research. You are responsible to see where you want to go and what you want to do. And I've been very fortunate by having friends like Ron. We were the same neighborhood, played the same baseball field, went to the same high school. Our careers went many different ways. But guess what? He believes in what he believes. And I know you believe in what you believe. So I'm now asking all of you to step up to the plate. We don't have the right to sit around and complain without doing something to change this. We must decide where we go from here. Now is not the time for us to wait for others to decide where we go from here. And I'm going to leave you on that. Thank you for tuning in. And don't forget, think about running for public office.
Hey, Rich.
Did you know with Richard Utley? Please mark your calendar and join us every first and third Tuesday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube. Did you know if you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you have an interesting topic or individual that you would like to see us discuss during future broadcasts, you can reach out to us on Facebook at Richard Utley. Until next time, have a nice day, and we will see you again for another Did You Know, and can be found on most of your favorite social media platforms.
Hey, Ron, you there?
We're still on.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Still on the air though.
Thank you for being on the program.